Hey guys, so there is actually a lot of stuff going on right now in the world of Sweet Georgia and in the world of my making things. Now, I want to share with you today on this video a little bit about all the things that I have been working on recently. It's a whole bunch of things. It seems like it might be a little bit of a mishmash, but it's just because I like all the fiber arts. And so there's a little bit of everything today. Hey guys, welcome. I'm Felicia from Sweet Georgia, and this is Taking Back Friday. This is a space where we come every Friday and we talk about knitting and weaving and spinning and dyeing and all of the fiber arts that we love so much. Specifically, I like to talk about making time to make things. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking a lot about all of the things that I have been making recently. I recently finished knitting that Novelli sweater. I showed that in last week's video. And so I immediately had to pick up and start knitting something else again. So I'll show you a little bit about what I'm knitting. I also have been talking to and interviewing a lot of spinners, and the spinners have really reignited my interest in doing a lot more hand spun yarn. And also, of course, I'm weaving. My big project of the year is called this epic cloth project that I'm working on. I don't know how epic it is right now because this warp seems pretty skinny, but I'll show you a little bit about what's going on this loom. And I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about what we've been doing at the school in terms of dyeing. So let's get into it. There's a lot of stuff today. So since we're here in this part of the attic, you can see my attic has these angled ceilings, and it's great in that I can tuck the looms in here once they're all threaded and everything like that. But this part of the process where I'm basically dressing the loom and I'm standing back here and, you know, arranging the yarn on the loom, and then I have to wind it on, it's a little bit uncomfortable back here. So now I might have shown you last week, or you might have seen it on my Instagram, Low Meets Loom. I previously dyed these warp chains using Procyon MX fiber reactive dyes. I dyed it sort of as part of the dyeing course that I was putting together for the School of Sweet Georgia. But they are lovely, they're shiny, they're mercerized cotton. It looks a little bit like silk. There's 5 warp chains here. There's 4 of them that are this purpley kind of color, and one of them that is kind of like an accent. It's an orange color. It's a gold color. It was supposed to be more yellow. It ended up being more gold. So what I'm doing here is I have sort of the warp spread out along these lease sticks, and I'm just going through and looking at each bundle at the cross, each bundle of yarns at the cross, and I have pre-bundled them into the right number that should fit into each gap of this rattle. So with each one of these bundles, I just pop it into the space in the rattle like so, and I move across, and you know, with this orange one, I'm gonna pop that in here. And basically what I'm doing is I'm taking these warp chains and spreading them out, and they're gonna spread out to probably about that wide. Now you can see my lease sticks are set up in this fancy, I don't know if you guys can see it. Let me pop this off for a second here. And these fancy angel wings. Now, these angel wings are designed by Purrington Looms. You can find them at purringtonlooms.com. When I asked for these ones, I talked with Bruce, who makes these angel wings. They're designed specifically for holding lease sticks at the back of your loom, so that way you don't have to tie up the lease sticks and have them all over the place. They're meant to be really super efficient. I've seen Laura Fry have them on her loom, and so that's part of the reason why I got them. Now, when I talked with Bruce about them, he asked me to send him some information about the angle of this back beam of the spring loom, and so I sent it to him, but I think maybe I told him incorrectly, and so for whatever reason, these angel wings are supposed to be this way, but because of the angle of how they were designed, they kind of do this. And I believe they're supposed to be secured on the top and the bottom so that they don't go anywhere, but because of the mistake that I made in specifying the angle of this back beam, there's no way to close off the bottom of them, so they're still loose. Feels a little bit dangerous, but in any case, this is my angel wing setup at the moment, until I can get it sorted out. But it is nice to have these holders where you basically just pop your least sticks through, and it's a little bit more convenient. Now, because I was concerned about the safety of this situation and possibly losing all of my yarns out of the least sticks, I tied the end of the least sticks together so that way they can't fall out of these angel wings. Theoretically, I can't lose any of the warp, but in either case, I'm gonna get this set up as soon as possible. So that's what's happening on this side of the loom for my epic project. Let's go to the other side. So now you can see from the front side of the loom, this is kind of the warp chains coming off the back side of the loom, and I just have them very loosely draped over the front beam here. Once these are all sort of on the loom and spread out through the rattle, then I'm going to straighten up the front, and then I will crank that whole thing onto the back beam, and then we can start threading and doing all the rest of the things that we need to get the yarn onto the loom. So that is kind of a project that is underway. Now, today is not too bad. Today is kind of rainy outside. It's a little bit cooler. On the hot days when it's really sunny and warm outside, it is crazy muggy in this attic here. So I'm doing my best to come, either in the early mornings, I'll do a tiny little bit, a few minutes here and there throughout the day, in the evening times when everybody's gone to bed, things like that. That's how I'm getting it in. You can also see, maybe, on this side of the studio here, we have the baby wolf loom, and there is some hand painted cotton here that we are going to be putting onto this loom eventually, very soon. So you guys know that last week I finished the Novelli sweater designed by Caitlin Hunter from Boylan Knitworks. So that is this sweater here, and I showed it on the video last week. Now, I showed previously, while I was working on it, the inside of this sweater. And basically what I had done was I pulled out 2 skeins of this blue color from my stash. They were test dye samples for one of the colorways that we were making. And so I just had these extra skeins in my stash, and with all of my hand-dyed yarn, even though we say, our aim is to make super consistent hand-dyed yarn where you don't even need to change skeins or alternate skeins, we still recommend that it's a good practice to alternate skeins. And so I always alternate skeins, and I have this seam on the inside because I twist my yarns up as I go. And as I showed this on the video, a whole bunch of you guys suggested to me that I look up helical knitting, helix knitting, or jogless join. It's not exactly jogless join, it's helix knitting. And so I did. And it's amazing, this idea of not having to twist your skeins and to be able to alternate one round and one round. One round of one skein, one round of another skein. If you're doing stripes with 2 different colors, you can do this technique. If you're alternating skeins in the round, this is a great thing to do. I'm not going to show you the tutorial for how to do it because Grace O'Neill has already made a fabulous tutorial about that, and I'm going to link to that below or somewhere here. But basically, I watched her video, and it's very clear what you have to do. So the basic idea is whatever color you're knitting with, you come around to where the join should be, and you stop 3 stitches before that join. Then you drop that yarn, and then you pick up the previous yarn, and you continue knitting around until you get 3 stitches before the end of where you left the previous yarn. So each time you're moving the join marker back 3 stitches, back 3 stitches, back 3 stitches. It doesn't seem like it makes sense. It doesn't seem comfortable, this idea of moving the start of round around backwards around the round. But if you're just knitting a giant tube in the round, alternating 2 skeins of yarn, it doesn't really matter where that join is because it doesn't show and it's not necessary. So in any case, watch her tutorial. It might be life-changing if you're doing a sweater or a project like this where you're alternating 2 skeins of yarn. This is a very handy technique. So I wanted to try this on a smaller scale, and so what I did was I got myself my little pattern from a long time ago. This is a pattern by Jared Flood called Turn a Square. And so he made a hat pattern like a million years ago called Turn a Square, and it's been in my Ravelry library ever since then. I think it was a free pattern initially back then. And so I decided just to cast on for another one of those hats, because you could always do with another hat pattern, right? And you could always do with another hat. So I cast on for this hat, and the needles that I'm using here are the new needles from Chiagu. So I talked about this a couple months ago when I got back from H&H in Cologne. I talked to Leon and Wendy at Chiagu, and they always have the booth that's right next to us or right behind us at the H&H show in Cologne. And so they showed me the new twist shorty needles that they have that they were launching this past June. And so they gave me a set so that I could play with them and see how they work and everything, and that's what I'm using to knit this hat here. So you can see it is a short circular needle, and it's with those Chiagu tips. They are interchangeable tips. So these ones, I didn't really screw them in very tight, but you can see you can unscrew them. There is a little, there's a little wire needle device that you can use to help tighten these so that they don't unscrew or that they don't come off. But you can see the needle tips are nice and short, and then this is a short length cable. Now, they had previously released this, and I talked about it after last year's H&H Cologne. They released a set that is the red lace tip shorties. And so these ones were being used, the sample was basically to knit a sock in the round with sock size needles, sock size tips, and a sock size circumference. So to knit a sock with these tiny, tiny, tiny little needles. And I tried it and I used it, but I feel like for socks, because the needle tips are so fine, they're so thin, I need a little bit more control, and so I tend to just use magic loop. But I know that there are a couple of people who commented who just swear by knitting small circumference items with tiny small little needle tips and tiny small needle circumferences. Now, I like the idea of that. My hands are just too big for that. So instead, what I wanted was some kind of a solution to all the hat needles that I've ever owned. And the hat needles that I've ever owned, they're all like this. They're like 12 inches, 16 inches in cable length, and then with these tiny little tips. The ones I've always had, I've always collected those clover Takumi bamboo hat size needles, 16 inches, you know, in all the different sizes. But now, Chiagu makes these ones with the interchangeable tips and the larger needle size. They are perfect. So those come in this package. These are the blue package. So yeah, so there's two sets. There's one that's the red set, the red twist shorties, and there's one that's the blue twist shorties. These are the new ones. These are the ones with the larger needle size. These needle sizes go from US 0 to US 3. So 2 millimeters to 3.25 millimeters. I believe the one I tested was even smaller than this. I believe it was something like, you know, 000 to 2.25 millimeter sock needles. Tiny, tiny minis. Those are the ones I tested last year. But there's also these ones, which go from US 0 to US 3, and then these ones, which go from US 4 to US 8. This is perfect. This is like knitting DK weight. This is knitting worsted weight. This is the one you want. So in any case, I started knitting this little hat with these short little circular needles, and it feels great because they feel like the Chiagu tips. They feel nice and sharp and pointy. They're the metal tips, and I don't have to do the magic loop thing where I have to push the needles from one side to the other, or push the stitches from one side to the other. So these feel really, really nice. We actually got a bunch of these to put up in our own shop for Sweet Georgia. So if you are wanting to get yourself a set of either the red or the blue twist shorties, you can find them on the Sweet Georgia shop right now. Just search Chiagu, they should come up. And yeah, we love these needles, they're awesome. Now, in addition to knitting this hat and trying to learn how to knit that jogless join or jogless stripes, I started another pattern. So you may or may not know that this summer we are doing a lace knit along for Sweet Georgia, and so there are a whole bunch of people in our Ravelry group who are knitting beautiful lace projects. I thought that I'm not very good at joining knit alongs because I finish so much later than everybody. I never make the deadline. But in any case, I was somewhat inspired because I saw somebody knit the Hitofude cardigan again. And literally every time I see somebody knit this cardigan, I am reminded that this cardigan pattern has been in my queue for years now, and I've wanted to knit it for so long. And so immediately after I finished Novelli, the very next day, I cast on for this Hitofude. So if you are not familiar with this pattern, it's a couple of years old now, but basically it's a cardigan with an open front, and it's knit entirely in one piece, and it's knit with all over lace. This is the extent of the lace pattern. It looks kind of like an arrowhead lace, something like that. So very, very simple lace pattern. It's something like four lines of lace, four rows of lace, and everything else is just, yeah, fill in the blanks. But this is basically knit all in one piece, and the starting of this is a provisional cast on. So basically you take some scrap yarn and you crochet a chain, and out of that you cast on your stitches. Eventually this provisional cast on will be removed and all of the live stitches will become available, and with those live stitches you graft or you sew them together to make your sleeves, and then you will take the rest of it and then you continue on knitting and knit the rest of the garment. So this is basically, from what I understand, this is going to eventually be the sleeve. I have to knit this much, this width, I have to knit this for 11 inches, and then it will fold over and become sleeves, and then the middle number of stitches will be continued on, and then I continue knitting on, and then that would be the rest of the sweater. So it feels very slow. It feels very slow going. The fact that it's all over lace, the fact that it's knit with very, very fine fingering weight yarn. I do like this color. It's that molasses color. I'm using the bulletproof sock yarn is what I'm using. Now, one of the things that I felt really proud of is I've been talking about how this year is really about using yarns from my stash, trying to use what I already have, use what is already available. And so with that, I'm very proud that I went through my Ravelry library and I looked at the patterns that I already own, and I picked the new project from something that's already been in my queue, rather than going out on the hunt for something new, some new pattern. I mean, if this pattern has been in my queue for years now, and every time I see it, I'm re-inspired by how I think it's a really elegant and beautiful sweater, I should just do it. So that is it for the knitting end of things. Now for the spinning end of things, I will let you know that I have been spending quite a bit of time with Rachel Smith at Welford Pearls. She does a podcast called Wool and Spinning on YouTube here. She has a Patreon. Rachel does tons and tons of teaching specifically around spinning. For a while there, Rachel actually, she's local to the Vancouver area. She was our spinning instructor at Sweet Georgia at our studio. And so she would come in every week and she would teach a group of people how to spin. And since then, she's done more and more teaching content on her own video channels and things like that. And so recently, in the past 2 months, she's come over and we've filmed 2 classes with Rachel that are gonna go up on the School of Sweet Georgia. She has done a course that is talking about spinning specifically for making a sweater, and then another one about spinning specifically for making sock yarns. So talking about things like yarn structure, about choosing fibers, about very, very interesting yarn construction, different ways of plying, multiple plies, just talking about a lot of the technical aspects of making really, really good, solid yarn for these purposes. It's really like 100% nerding out on spinning tech, and it's fun. It's amazing to see all of the things that Rachel's done. And I've talked about this before, you know, Rachel and Katrina together, they wrote a book recently called Unbraided about working with hand-dyed fiber and using it in multiple different ways in order to make the kinds of colors in the hand-spun yarn that you want. So she's done that recently. So spending a lot of time with Rachel and watching her spin, she spins beautifully, like really professional looking yarn. And I spin, but I have long been frustrated with my own spinning. You know, like I want my yarn to be soft and I want it to feel squishy. I find that I have some trouble with overspinning a lot because I like to make worsted, shiny looking yarn. And I do. I spin and I put a little bit too much twist into my singles. So I'm taking a lot of inspiration from what I've seen Rachel teach and how she teaches, and I'm trying to like loosen up on my own spinning so that I don't put so much twist in the first spinning, and all of this kind of stuff. And so one of the other things that I learned from Rachel was this practice of taking all of your bobbins, all of the bobbins that you spun, before you ply them, rewind them onto a storage bobbin, like rewind them using a electric bobbin winder or a handheld bobbin winder, but rewind them so that way the beginning of the part that you spun is again the beginning of the part that you're plying. So I did this with a couple of bobbins that were lying around. These were all colors. These are the same colorway that were dyed on two different fibers. One of them is BFL and silk, and then the other one is this yak and merino and silk blend. Is so nice. So these ones were the colors that we had done for Spinzilla this past year. It's a special colorway. And I finally had a chance to ply them. But before plying them, I did that exact trick. I rewound everything onto weaving storage bobbins, and then I plied from those weaving storage bobbins. Now with this one, this merino, yak, and silk one, I decided to make it into a 3-ply because my yarn was so fine. And I'm really enjoying the look of 3-ply yarns where all of the colors are really mixed and blended a little bit more. There's something very, very soothing about how round the yarn is, about how the colors are all mixed up a little bit more, about just there's more optical mixing. There's all sorts of stuff that's going on in this skein that I absolutely love. So this, you know, the yarn was spun a long time ago, many, many months ago. Finally, if I had a chance to ply it, I think it ended up being something like 275 yards. Yeah, so this ended up being about 222 yards. And then this one is one that I made into, again, just a regular 2-ply, but I rewound all of the bobbins, I rewound all of the singles onto storage bobbins, and then I plied this together. This is a 2-ply, the BFL and silk. This ended up being 257 yards. They are the same weight, but this one has less yardage because it's more dense. Ultimately, because it's 3 plies, each ply is very densely spun and then applied together. So this one, yeah, it's quite an intensely dense but wonderful yarn. And then this one is a 2-ply. So I think that these ones are both going to go onto the weaving loom for separate projects. I'll probably use them for weft, not for warp. So I'll have to find some kind of a yarn that would be really, really suitable for warp, and then I can use these to make some nice scarves. So that's what's happened with some spinning stuff that I've done. Now, after clearing off all of those bobbins, I finally got a chance to start spinning something new. So I have finally broken up that braid, and I am going to be spinning the shacked color. I said, you know, I wanted to do the spin along, I wanted to participate in the spin along, but again, I'm behind everybody else. So I have just now started to break up this braid and started to spin it. So what I did with the full length of this fiber is I divided it into 6 equal chunks. So I basically folded it in half and then folded it in thirds, and then I had like basically 6 segments, and I broke it up into 6 segments. And then with each of those segments, I tried to pair them up so that they were most different across the length of each segment. So you can see these two, there's two segments laid together here, and no section really overlaps with a section of the same color, right? This gold is going over the purple, the white's going over the purple, the blue's going over the purple, all of this kind of stuff. They're just, it's different all of the way across. And so I had 3 pairs like this. Then with each one of the pairs, I stripped each half into 7 little strips. So these are 7 strips that are about a finger width in size. And so again, overlapping the 2 of them, what I'm doing is I'm doing a combo spin. So combination spinning, combination drafting, basically taking these 2 colors at the same time, and I'm drafting from the front of this fiber at the same time. So when I spin this, you can see that the blue is going to spin with the white, and they're going to barber pole a little bit. And then when I get down here, the purple and the gold are going to barber pole a little bit. And so as I go through this entire length of fiber, holding these 2 sections together, I'm mixing and blending within the singles. And so one pair is going to go to one bobbin, the second pair is going to go to a second bobbin, and the third pair is going to go to a third bobbin. And then I'm going to do the trick that I learned from Rachel, which is to rewind all of the skeins onto storage bobbins, and then I'm going to ply and make a 3-ply. So it will be a 3-ply made from 3 bobbins of combination drafted yarn. I'm so excited about this. So I'm so excited about this because I love the look of combination spun yarn. I love, again, that mixing and blending of all the colors. These are things that are absolutely not possible with any other technique. You can't dye your yarns to make it look this way. The only way you can get yarn like this is by spinning it. And so that part of it I think is the most exciting. And then again, I can take this yarn and then put it on the loom and weave with it. I always struggle with, you know, taking fiber and breaking it up and spinning with it because I always think, oh, what if I ruin it? What if I wreck it? But you know, being in this world and in this work, I have become comfortable with the idea that this is not the last braid of fiber that I will ever spin. And so I don't ever feel like anything is ruined anymore. I feel very much like there will always be more fiber. It's going to be okay. So that is what I've been doing on the spinning end of things. I know it's Tour de Fleece right now. July is Tour de Fleece. I've never participated in Tour de Fleece before. I just cannot spin that consistently for that many days in a row. It just, yeah, it's not easy. So if any of you guys are doing it, kudos to you. I'm so excited for any of you guys who are spinning every day, who are able to do this. I wish that I could sit there for just 10 minutes a day and do a little bit of spinning. Maybe I could. Maybe I could. Now, the last thing that I want to share with you guys is something that's very special to me, and this is a new course that we've just done for the School of Sweet Georgia. And so for this course, we worked together with Mariana Fruchtengarden. Now, Mariana used to be a dyer for us at Sweet Georgia, and when she came to us at Sweet Georgia, she had already had something like 20 years of dye experience. Mariana studied in Brazil. She did resist dyeing specifically in Brazil, and then moved to Canada, and she has been very, very active in batik for a long time. Batik is basically wax resist. You paint onto fabric with a wax pen, and then you dye it, and then the wax is then removed, and then you reveal the design that you've made. So that is batik. Then she came to Canada to study at NSCAT, the Nova Scotia Arts program. And so when she was at NSCAT, she said that she was not allowed to use wax in her process. Maybe it was like messy or something like that in the studio. And so she wasn't allowed to use wax anymore. And so she shifted her practice to Shibori dyeing. Now, if anybody doesn't know what Shibori dyeing is another form of resist dyeing, but it is the resist dyeing technique that is practiced in Japan. So in Japan, you do Shibori dyeing, and it encompasses a whole bunch of different techniques, different ways of binding and tying fabric in order to make beautiful repeating patterns. Now, Shibori is done very precisely in Japan. Like, everything is very, very sharp and perfect and just perfect. But Mariana has been teaching aspects of Shibori dyeing for many, many years now to workshops locally in town and abroad and in Brazil, all over the place. And She has developed a professional practice around shibori that involves making layers, layers of different color on fabric. Traditional shibori is typically done with just one color, and it's very often done with indigo dyes. Mariana's innovation, I think, on shibori dyeing is that she's taken a lot of the work and used the feeling of that kind of resist dyeing and then done it in layers on cloth. So it produces these beautiful, like, three-dimensional effects. It creates nuance and depth to cloth that is otherwise difficult to make by one single shot process. So she's teaching what she does in a course for us on the School of Sweet Georgia. And you can see one of the samples that was produced from the course. So this is a cloth that she initially folded into a different shape, and then she clamped it with a circle block. So she used a wooden block and then placed it onto the fabric, onto the folded fabric, and then sandwiched it between these two circle blocks and clamped it. And then we dyed that, and that was one layer, and then that one layer made these circles. And then for a second layer, what we did was we take the fabric and then we folded it again and then wrapped it around a pole with twine. And so that form of shibori is called arashi shibori. And so by wrapping the fabric around a pole wrapping the fabric around a pole and squishing it all up, it forms another form of resist. And that other form of resist makes these like zebra stripes on there. And so we dyed those zebra stripes with a different color. And so you can see there's already just 2 layers of color on this one project, and it's already made for a very, very interesting cloth. So this whole process is done very, very simply with fiber reactive dyes. And so we teach fiber reactive dyes in the School of Sweet Georgia right now, and we're teaching it just in an immersion dyeing process. Basically just like taking your yarn or your fabric and then dumping it into a bath of dye and then letting it process and batch like that. And so that is basically all you need to know in order to do something like this. So I'm just so thankful and grateful that Mariana has been willing to work with us to make these videos so that we can capture this content. Shibori is beautiful. The things that you can make with shibori are beautiful. And just the way that Mariana does her shibori, where she applies them in multiple layers, it is wonderful, and it's a very organic process that she works through. So her dyeing aesthetic and her way of dyeing can be very different from my way of dyeing. Sometimes because I have had to make recipes that are repeatable, that I can teach, that other people can reproduce, because I've come from that sort of background, I tend to approach things in a way where I can document and remember and all of these kinds of things. And then working with Mariana through this course, I get to really observe how you can just play, how you just layer colors, how you can look at something, you open up a fabric and you look at it and you judge it and you say, what should I do now? And then very naturally and intuitively choose what's the next step. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure. Where do I go next? Where do I go next? What do I do next? So that part of it was very, very fun to work with her. Now, if you're wondering how this might apply to yarn, because you can't really fold and clamp yarn, you can't really wrap yarn around a pole and dye it and all that kind of stuff, we did a similar technique here. And this has been dyed on a sock blank. So I talk about sock blanks all the time, I think, but basically a sock blank is a fabric that has been knitted from knitting yarn. So here's the knitting yarn coming off of this tube of fabric that has been knitted previously. And then we took this knitted fabric, this is basically our Tough Love sock yarn, we took the knitted fabric and we did a similar process. We folded it in a couple of different ways, so that way we could dye circles first and creating that resist dye, and then we took it apart, and then Mariana basically scrunched it up onto a pole so that she could create the zebra stripes. So again, same process, different kind of textile, different kind of yarn. Once this sock blank is dyed, you can unravel it and then knit it into something else. So the design that's on here will not be in the thing that you finally choose to knit, but it's part of the process. So this will become translated into something new. It could be very, very interesting. So that is a little bit of everything that's happening right now at Sweet Georgia. We just got a lot of stuff going on. We're making a lot of stuff is coming. I highly encourage you guys to sign up for our email newsletter because it will let you know everything that is coming up, including sales, including special events, hint, hint, and including, you know, the mystery knit along that we're going to be starting in August. We just got a lot of stuff coming, and so I hope that you guys don't miss anything. So please head on over to SweetGeorgiaYarns.com to sign up for our email if you're not already on there. Thank you if you already are. So I think that's it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for being here today to hear me chat about yarn and weaving and knitting and dyeing and all of these wonderful things. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you like this episode, please do hit the like button. And if you want to see more videos like this, please do hit subscribe and you'll get notified every Friday when new videos go live. Thanks guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one. All right, bye for now.